a good group tonight. Oh my gosh, Lady Ongarth is here. Sorry, things you noticed.
Wow.
Hi, Lady Ongarth. We pray for you all the time,
Thank you.
based solely upon who your husband is. Any other things are extraneous. Good to see you, ma'am. All right, let's go ahead and open up in prayer. Father, thank you for this night. Thank you for, God, thank you for your presence and your peace that passes all understanding and what has been a very, very interesting last couple of weeks, Lord, and things just seem to get more and more hectic by the day, Father. Thank you for your presence within each of us, Lord, that reminds us that you are greater than any circumstance. You're greater than any illness or any amount of panic or turmoil, God, that you're omnipotent, you're omniscient, you've seen tomorrow, and you control all of this. If you wanted anything to change, you could change it on a dime, Lord. So, Father, we pray that we would cling to that and never forget that. God, as we come into tonight, may we just be receptive, have our hearts and minds open to your word tonight. Help me be clear, and Lord, may our discussion be beneficial um, and enlightening for each one of us, Father. We love you and we pray this in your name. Amen. Okie dokie. So, what happened last week? For those that were here. Oh, no. I was really confused because I didn't see anything in the chat. Then I realized the Bible study chat channel, so that was part of the confusion. Yeah. Yeah, I got blessed for stealing mom's gold. That's true. Also, how not to be a Levite. Yeah. So, yeah, this was, as Ongarth put it, and I think very succinctly, this is a quick glimpse into what might have been kind of the daily life, or at least a slice of life of the time of the judges, where the Bible explicitly states over chapters 17 and 18 several times that a verse that we all know by heart is the last verse in the book of Judges. In those days, there was no king, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. And this is just evidence of that. So we have this guy, Micah, who steals money from mom. Then mom's like, I'm going to curse that money. And then the son's like, oh, hey, mom, I took it, but I wanted to return it. Nothing to do with any curse or anything. And she's like, okay, cool. Blessed are you. Here, take this money and go do, and, whatever. And so he makes an ephod, and he makes gods, like graven images, and sets up his home. He makes this establishment as a center of worship, and there's this Levite who comes, and he basically pays for him, or you could call it a bribe. It was kind of a bribe for this Levite to be ordained there by Micah himself, and then set up his home as this place, as the center of worship, which is away from where the center of worship has been, where the tabernacle is. Okay? Is all this sounding familiar?
Yes.
Cool. It's good to know that this sounds familiar to one person. Good job. All right. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and read the first two verses of Judges chapter 18. I just realized that my secondary keyboard is not plugged in, so it doesn't matter how long I'm going to type on it, nothing's going to come out. All right, cool. There we go. Can someone read that for us? You'll take the easy passage. All right, go for it, Kes.
In those days there was no king in Israel. And in those days the tribe of the people of Dan was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in. For until then, no inheritance among the tribes of Israel had fallen to them. So the people of Dan sent 5 able men from the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. And they said to them, Go and explore the land. And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there.
All right. Thank you. So, what we have here is we have this other tribe, the tribe of Dan. And it says these guys were looking for an inheritance to dwell in because they hadn't had a place allotted among the 12 tribes. When Joshua had come in, done his conquest, there had been the allotment of the 12 tribes in their various places. You know, most of us know where Judah is, Judah being in the south along the coast of the Mediterranean. But all the tribes were kind of given their own locations. But Dan just hadn't managed to obtain any place yet. Now, this is kind of a tricky wording because what it actually, a lot of commentators that I read said, is that Dan. Actually, let me do this first. I will drop this in the chat for you guys so you can actually see. Hopefully that'll work. No? Okay. I was hoping it would put it up, but you can click on the link and it'll bring it up. That's a map of where the tribes were, and you can kind of see Dan over on the left there, north of Judah, kind of beside Ephraim and Benjamin. Oh, there goes the map. Thanks, Kes. I don't know how she does it. Anyways. Now, this is the place where Dan was allotted to dwell in. But the problem that a lot of commentators say is that it was the way that the wording is that they weren't able to fully conquer it because of activity of certain Canaanite groups in there, most notably the Philistines. You can kind of see the city of Ekron there. We've talked a little bit about that one. And so a lot of the problem for Dan would be that these were the people who were there, who were living there, were tough. Their cities were well fortified, and the people of Dan found it difficult to drive them out. And so they were looking for a place that might be easier to dwell in. So they like, hey, let's send some guys out and let's go see if we can get and if we can find another place to settle that's not as hard to conquer. Now, does anyone notice a problem with this? That's a very interesting verse to bring up. How dare you bring up Joshua 1? Yeah, it's not immediately like totally egregious, but it does kind of serve of an indication of an overall mindset of the people of Israel. It's like, this is hard. I don't want it easier. Yeah. The people of Dan were not content with where they were because they were having to put too much work into it. the doctor dropping, just random chat into here without actually being in the Bible study channel. How dare he? So that's where we're at. These 5 guys from the tribe of Dan go out. They're like, go check out the land, see what you can find. And so they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and they lodged there. All right. Oh man, chat. Oh, chat gonna chat. All right. So when it says that he came to, when these guys came to the house of Micah and lodged there, that seems really strange to us. It's like, man, this house of Micah seems to be a real popular place. He's got this Levite and he's got these 5 guys. It's just like, is this like a hotel he's running? And in all honesty, it's kinda a little bit. Micah established his house as the center of worship. And if that was the case, then it's natural for him to build a community around for people that are coming to worship there. And so what's probably happened in this time since Micah has, set up his house as the shrine, that there's been a sort of village that's grown up around it. And so for travelers that are journeying out and about, it would be natural to stop, kind of like just a little, not a wayside attraction, but you guys get what I mean. Just kind of on the road. If you need to stop somewhere, it's a good place for that. Making sense? Not making sense? Okay. All right. So that's where we're at. We've got these 5 guys that come. They're like, hey, we're just, let's stop here for the night. Oh, there goes Cass. All right. Look, guys, Cass can't answer for you all. I'm going to need input from other people now. All right. So can I get someone to read verses 3 through 6?
I'll read it.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead.
When they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, and they turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here?" And he said to them, "This is how Micah dealt with me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest." And they said to him, "Inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The journey on which you will go is under the eye of the Lord."
Thank you. Okay. So now, this is a really interesting thing to read. It says, when they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. So the first thought we may have is, how in the world, out of all the people, like, what are the odds of them recognizing the voice of this, of one random Levite? They don't even live in the same area. This Levite came from Bethlehem. These guys are from Dan, which is closer to the coast. So how would this be possible? There are a few explanations. The first one is that maybe the guys, wise rat, that's one. There may have been an accent that was specific to the region. They may have heard that and be like, that guy ain't from around here. Another thing is that they may have been nearby and heard a Levite doing Levitical things, maybe either singing a song or making his recitations in a room, and they may have heard that and been like, that sounds like a Levite or a priest doing a thing, and so they may have consulted him that way. There is a third possibility, and we'll come back to it. Put that one on the back burner. Okay? At any rate, so we have these 5 guys, and they go and they get the priest, and they're like, hey, who brought you here? Obviously, you don't, this isn't where you're supposed to be, just from probably either accent or something else. What's your business here? What are you doing here? And so he tells him, he says, this is how Micah dealt with me. He's hired me, and I am his priest. Now, we talked about that wording last week, how Micah has hired this priest, and then Micah has become like a father to the priest. And it's not the priest being the lead or the spiritual leader in this household, I guess, for lack of a better term. But it's Micah instead, which is just foreboding in all manner. Welcome back, Cass. And so he tells him, listen, he's hired me. I'm serving as the priest here. And so the people of Dan are like, you know what? Let's ask him and see if God is with us on our venture. Because remember, they're on an errand. They're looking for another place for maybe not the entire tribe of Dan, but at least part of the tribe of Dan to go settle in. So the priest tells me, he says, go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord. Does this seem suspicious to anybody at all?
Could they be lying? Possibly.
Aaron gets a pass because he wasn't here last week. He could be lying. Any
I don't know
other
if
thoughts?
this is like a passive aggressive. Go in peace. The Lord's. The Lord's
asking,
with you, definitely.
Yeah, I'm asking people to put this in context.
Gotcha.
What were we saying last week about this whole setup with Micah and this priest? Was this a legitimate site of worship or a legitimate method of worship? Yeah. This isn't exactly what we would call, correctly ordained. Micah's not a guy that can ordain priests. This house of Micah is not an acceptable place of worship. Plus, there are other images to other gods that are in this place. So everything about this screams that anything that comes out of here is suspect at best. But the people of Dan, however, apparently don't have the scruples. Again, remember, this is a slice of life out of daily life in Israel. Idolatry was kind of everywhere. I run into that a lot throughout the book. And so they're just like, hey, let's ask this high priest. He's in touch with God. He's a priest after all. If the Lord's going to be with us on our journey. And so the priest was like, yeah, totally. Okay. And so now he's got like these 5 guys have, the blessing of the priest and of quote the Lord to go and find a new home. That's correct. Nope. Shame on Scribe. There you go. Sorry. All right. Any questions so far? No typing in the chat, so it doesn't look like there are any questions. If you guys come up with questions, please just drop them in the chat. Can I get someone to read verses 7 through 13 as we carry on with the story? Thanks, Hungers.
Happy to help. Okay. Then the 5 men departed, and came to Laish, and saw the people that were there, how they lived in security after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and unsuspecting, lacking nothing that is in the earth and possessing wealth, and how they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone. And when they came to their brothers at Zorah and Estra, their brothers said to them, "What do you report?" And they said, "Arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. And will you do nothing? Do not be slow to go, to enter in and possess the land. As soon as you go, you will come to an unsuspecting people. The land is spacious, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is in the earth." So 600 men of the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah and Eshcol, and went up and encamped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. On this account, that place is called Menahadan to this day. Behold, it is west of Kiriath Jearim. Then they passed on from there to the hill country of Ephraim, and came to the house of Micah.
Boy, Micah gets a lot of visitors, doesn't he? Thank you, Ongarth. All right. So these 5 guys are going along, and they come to the city Laish, or however the crap you pronounce it. Darn it. I'm trying to link in a picture, but it will not take because apparently the link is absurd. There we go. Got it. That is a really tiny picture. I wish that was larger. I'm sorry, guys. But way up at the top there, you can kind of see the land of Palestine. And up at the top of that kind of blue line, that there's a little like orange star-looking symbol. That is the country of Laish, or the city of Laish. Way down at the bottom is the land where these people of Dan originally came from. And so it's a trek of about 120, 125 miles between the 2 spots. And so these guys were on this trek, and they finally come to this city, and they're looking at it, and it's like, okay, it's a nice location. Doesn't look like it's super strong. Well fortified, like a lot of these cities of the Philistines that are near this place that they, where we're living. And it says they're far from the Sidonians. Now, that sounds kind of odd, like off the wall. It's like, who cares? What people tend to believe is that the Sidonians, or the city of Sidon, was to the northwest. It was a coastal city, and it was a city of great power. You've probably heard of Tyre and Sidon. These are those 2 cities. And Sidon was kind of like this. I don't even want to call it a confederacy, but it was like the head city of a bunch of different districts. And so Sidon kind of acted as the center of these multiple cities. Now, when it says they're far away from Sidon, that's the idea, is that the Sidonians are nowhere nearby to be able to protect or defend this city. And so they don't have any dealings with anyone. It's just kind of the city that exists on its own, nice and peaceful. They're like, that's a nice spot. So they go back down 120 some miles, back down to Dan, and the rest of the people of Dan are like, "What'd you see?" And they're like, "Okay, so way up north, there's totally this awesome place that we can completely take, no resistance. It's going to be fantastic. We can go up there, just kind of wipe them out and take the city for our own." And we also had this priest guy, while we were on our way up there, told us that God's totally with us on this journey, and it's going to go great. Okay? So it says they arm up 600 men from the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, because remember, they're going to go, subjugate a city. They went up and encamped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah, sorry, which you can kind of see just east of where they started on that map. And they passed on from there to the hill country of Ephraim, which is north, to the house of Micah. So now you have these guys, and let's be fair, when we're talking about this, yes, there's 600 guys who are armed for war. But this isn't strictly a campaign of destruction. Remember, these guys are looking to claim an inheritance. So they're not setting out simply as conquerors. They've got settlers. So it's kind of like the feeding of the 5,000 in the Gospels. 5,000 men got fed, but there were also women and children. So it was a much larger number. Kind of the same idea here. You have the men who are the warriors, but you're also going to have women and children, and a lot of belongings to settle a new city. And so it's not unlikely that you probably have somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000, possibly more people making this trek northwards to settle this new city up by Laish. Okay? That's going to be important in a few verses. Any questions so far? This is where things really start to get interesting. Because, well, things from last week kind of rear their head again. So could someone take verses 14 through 20? Wise Rat, thank you, sir. Go ahead.
When the 5 men who had gone to scout out the country of Laish said to their brothers, "Do you know that in these houses there are an ephod, household gods, a carved image, and a metal image? Now therefore consider what you will do." And they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah and asked him about his welfare. Now the 600 men of the Danites' army with their weapons of war stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who had gone to scout out the land went up and entered and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image. While the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with 600 men armed with weapons of war. And when these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, the metal image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Keep quiet, put your hand on your mouth, and come with us, and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or to the priest to a tribe and the clan in Israel?" And the priest's heart was glad. He took the ephod and the household gods and the carved image, and went along with the people.
Ooh, things are getting interesting. All right. So these 5 guys, these scouts that went out the first place, was like, "Hey, over there in that place, there's a guy named Micah, but more importantly than that, there is a priest, this Levite, and he's got an ephod, and he's got household gods, and he's got these images. What would you say to us kind of just I'm not gonna say what you should do, but what do you think if we were to do something with that?" As the people of Dan are like, "We could totally use those." So these guys, these 600 men, head up to, remember, this isn't just a house, this is a village of sorts. They come up to the gates of the village, these 600 men, and they ask for the priest. So the priest is like, "Okay." And so he comes out and he meets these guys by the gate, and they ask about his welfare. They're like, "Hey, how's it going? What's up?" Talking with the priest, probably feigning some sort of religious question or something like that. Meanwhile, while the 600 warriors have the priest there at the gate, you have these 5 guys that were already here before going inside, because remember, they've already been here. They're familiar with the layout of this place, And they've more than likely been in, when they were talking to the priest the last time, they probably went into his home, into his chambers, where all of these religious, images and idols and such were. So they go in to grab these things while the priest is distracted at the gate. So they get them and they come back out, and as they're leaving, as they're heading back out the gate, the priest looks over and thinks, that looks familiar. All those look a little familiar. And he asks, admittedly, a very reasonable question. What are you doing? And the response he gets is great. It's twofold. The first half is basically a threat. He's like, put your hand on your mouth. Shut up. It's like, do you see us? Do you see that we are 600 guys and we are armed for war? This is us saying, hey, might makes right. We're just doing what's right by us. But then they kind of open the door a little bit and say, hey, but we'll let you in on this. He's like, come with us. And look at this next line. This is amazing. Be to us a father and a priest. Yeah, that's definitely not a thing that's happened before. Definitely not a thing we saw in the last chapter. Totally new stuff. Yeah, this is exactly what Micah told the priest last week. He says, come in to be a father and a priest to me. And we know how that turned out. It says that the priest was as a son to Micah. And now you have not just one man asking this, but an entire portion of a tribe of Israel. 600 men, possibly thousands of people saying this to this priest, when he is clearly shown that he is not a man of stature that will be able to fulfill that request. Or at the very least, if he's going to be a father, remember who his father has actually been acting as. So either way, probably not the best of the best of offers from the people of Dan. However, yeah, exactly. So here we see, the Danites. They're just like, so come be with us. Would you rather be the priest for one guy or for an entire tribe? And this priest thinks about it, and he's like, you make a good argument. So he says the priest's heart was glad, and he took everything, all the stuff that had been taken out of his own home, and he takes it and he goes among the people. He's going to go with them wherever the heck they're going. And backwards compatibility is true. James 1 talks about this. Double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. He's like, I will go with whoever has the most money. All right. Any questions on that? Or extra commentary in the case of Ongarth? Go ahead, Ongarth.
What I love about that is you started that statement before I put my hand up.
I saw you typing in the chat. I knew it was going.
I think it's really interesting that, and we'll probably get to this more later, but the Israelites are told to go kick the people out of the land for worshiping idols, right? People who are worshiping idols. And what are the Israelites doing? Not only are they, in this story, not kicking those people out of the land because it's too hard, they are instead raiding one another to steal idols from one another. So just something to look at there.
there's actually a fun point that comes up, and we're circle back around to that in this next passage. So throw up the link. But yeah, one of the commentaries was very much on point with something that that happens in this next bit. So can someone take verses 21 through 26 for? Excuse me. Nobody wants to take. All right, fine. I'll take this one. So they turned and departed, putting the little ones and the livestock and the goods in front of them. When they had gone a distance from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house were called out, and they overtook the people of Dan. And they shouted to the people of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you, that you come with such a company?" And he said, "You take my gods that I made and the priest and go away, and what have I left? How then do you ask me, what's the matter with you?" And the people of Dan said to him, "Don't let your voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household." Then the people of Dan went their way. And when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his home. Okay. This is kind of this whole interaction is very telling about the state of affairs in Israel. Or at least to me it does. So, as they're leaving, probably some people noticed that something suspicious was happening. So Micah gathers up some of the people from surrounding village to go chase after these guys from Dan and find out, what's the big idea. Now, for starters, just one quick thing. It says they turned to party and they put the little ones and the livestock and the goods in front of them. Why would they do that? Why would you put the most vulnerable at the front of the caravan? Now, why would they be attacked from behind, Java Gal? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kess and Lady Ongarth have got it. These guys know that what they did was just straight thievery. They just stole these graven images, these religious icons, along with the priest of the village. The reason that it was a religious center, and they're running. They're heading north, and so obviously it's like, well, they're probably going to be a little ticked off. Let's put the vulnerable ones, the women and children, up at the front, and so we've got our warriors back at the back to protect. And so obviously they knew that what they did was at the absolute best questionable. So we already see that they're compromised in their beliefs, in that they're willing to do this, even though they recognize that they are. Ugh. So we've got that happening. And so Micah, true to form, arouses all of his guys, and they go chasing after him. So he has this guy shouting at the people of Dan, and they're like, what's the big? So the Danites are just, this is hilarious. They're like, What's the big idea? You've gathered such a large group to come after us. What's the matter with you? just this beautiful irony that just, oh man, it's just sparkling in irony. It's great. And Micah is probably, akin to, the jaw drop. He's like, did you seriously just ask me what's the matter? You come in here, you steal my priest, you steal these idols, these gods that I've made, and you're running away with them. You have the audacity to ask what might be bothering me? I think for the first time, Micah is actually kind of validated in being a little upset. His response is actually somewhat merited. Now, what one commentator very keenly pointed out is the way that this whole passage is loaded with irony, but the irony that Micah is having to chase after the stuff that he's made. Now, what do I mean by that? Micah made these gods, and now he's having to chase after them to protect them? Not only that the gods won't stay put, Micah has set up these gods as idols to be worshipped, but they can't defend themselves. It falls to Micah to protect the things that he's worshiping. Yeah. So it's this. It really is just kind of almost. This whole thing is just like, duh. You're having to protect your own gods. What kind of gods are these? But this is everything that Micah's attached to. He's got this religious center. What is he without these? So the people of Dan, these 600 guys armed with weapons of war, remember, they say, don't let your voice be heard among us. In other words, probably best not to raise your voice or get angry with us, because I don't know if you've noticed, but there's some mean guys around here, and it'd be a shame if you lost more than what you've already lost. Ooh. That you can taste the threat in that. And then so it says that, the people of Dan went their way, and Micah just realized that they were too strong for him. He goes back his way. And that's really the last that we hear of Micah. That's the end of his story. We don't know as far as I know, I don't think there's any other mention of him. But yeah, that's his part in the story. But we still have the people of Dan who have the Levite and these religious idols. So any questions about that part? All right. And let's just close out the chapter with the last 5 verses. Or the last one. Someone's got to take this one.
I can do it.
Sorry.
Okay.
Taking a drink of water. Go ahead.
So they turned and departed, putting the little ones and the livestock and the goods in front of them.
Oh,
When they
hang
had
on.
gone
Nope.
Oh, am I reading the
Looking at the
wrong
wrong
one?
one.
Sorry.
Yep, verse 27, man.
There we go. I was like, wait, they did it again? All right. But the people of Dan took what Micah had made, and the priest who belonged to him, and they came to Laish to a people quiet and unsuspecting, and struck them with the edge of the sword, and burned the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. Then they rebuilt the city and lived in it. And they named the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their ancestor, who was born to Israel. But the name of the city was Laish at the first. And the people of Dan set up the carved images for themselves, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of captivity of the land. So they set up Micah's carved image that he had made as long as the house of God was at Shiloh.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a few things here, and we're gonna talk about this in depth. So, what we kind of expect ends up happening. The Danites go north. They come to the city of Laish, which again, just not well fortified, not prepared for combat, and they just absolutely wipe it off the map. They slaughter the people, they burn the city with fire, and then they rebuild the city in that location. And they call it Dan, after their tribe, after their father, for whom their entire tribe is named. Then they set up the carved image for themselves. And this Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up Micah's carved image that he made as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. All right. So let's just go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room. Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses. Is this honestly Moses' grandson? To have come from such a bloodline, Moses was kind of well known among the people of Israel. And as a result, that would be possibly the third explanation as to why the people of Dan recognized his voice when there was just the five guys in the house of Micah. Because it may be that if your granddad was Moses, you might have a recognizable voice too. We know that Moses was of the tribe of Levi, because obviously his brother Aaron was. It's possible. I mean, the Jews aren't necessarily known for filling out their genealogies completely. They do tend to skip generations, but this is happening at the same time as Phineas, who was the grandson of Aaron. So it is perfectly feasible and halfway likely that this is actually who this was. Now, even in the passage that we posted up in Discord, there's a footnote when it's after Moses. And the footnote says that this can also be translated as Manasseh. So now the real question is, whose grandson is he? Is he the grandson of Moses or of some guy named Manasseh? What do you guys think? Do you think we can be definitively clear about this? Should we try to be definitively clear about this? And the doctor thinks it's a trick question. Okay. So if it's a trick question, what's the trick? All right. So they're both right. Doc is right in that this is a bit of a trick question, but here's the reasoning. It is when this was translated or when this was written down, the character of Moses was such a was very much kind of the symbol, humanly speaking, for Israel. That he was this great leader, led them the 40 years in the wilderness, was the emblem of their deliverance from Egypt. Got the law, all this stuff. So he's this outstanding figure. We understand that even in the New Testament during the Gospels in Jesus' time, the Pharisees were all about the law of Moses, sort of thing. And to contrast the character of Moses with this individual was incredibly, just powerfully insulting. That this would be someone that just 2 generations removed from Moses would behave in such a way. And so what ended up happening was that the scribes of that time made marks in the script to change it from saying Moses to Manasseh.
Wow.
That's what, as a certain amount of admittance has been made within the Jewish community, because the way in which it's written, I don't have any markings of it, but the actual way it's translated is that it's not. If you read the Hebrew, Hebrew doesn't have vowels, and so the way that you would read Moses is MSSH, or would be the way it's written, but Manasseh is MNSSH, essentially. But the N is kind of not in line with the rest of the letters. It's written above. So it's almost like, you kind of got the little caret if you want to insert something in English. Like if you want to insert a word or a letter, you have that little caret to drop to say, hey, say this first. So spoken aloud, it was said Manasseh, but written, it actually says Moses.
So do you think it was if you're reading the original text, you would have understood that, hey, okay, this was added as a way of saying shame on this person for bringing shame to the name of Moses?
Essentially, yes. Moses was held in such a regard that it was just unthinkable that such a thing would happen. And so, in order to essentially protect the legacy, so to speak, of Moses, whenever it was spoken aloud, it was read as Manasseh. But if you were reading it, and again, the law was not readily available to most people, so the only way they would get that is when it was read by someone who had it, either a scribe or a priest, who would read it as Manasseh. So what we have is the convolution, the muddying of Scripture because of a fear of besmirching one man. So I'll ask again. Does it matter? Why, Doc? Sorry, I saw Wise Rat typing, and I was like, and I see yes, and it's like, oh, why? But no, why, Doc? think Kess is on the right track. Is there an infallible human lineage? I would submit that there is not. So the answer is yes and no. It's absolutely a trick question. Yes, it matters because it shows us an increased fallibility and our own vulnerabilities to be uncomfortable with failure. But it also doesn't matter because sin is sin. And the failures of this one man is completely independent of who his grandfather was. His actions resulted in the downplay or the downfall, in many ways, of an entire tribe of Israel. So much of the actions of Dan in this, and by proxy, Jonathan the Levite, that it's been suggested that this incident is part of the reason why the tribe of Dan is not listed among tribes of the 144,000 in the book of Revelation. It's even gone so far as to say some people believe that the Antichrist would come out of the tribe of Dan. It's the Jewish people view this as incredibly heinous. Now, let's leave that behind for a second. There's a timeline-wise, we see that the people set up this carved image in the city of Laish, and Jonathan serves as the priest, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. What are we talking about there? Okay. So the exile, you're talking about, because remember, we're in the north of Israel, so that would have been in 722 BC when Assyria came down and dispersed all the people, like took them away, took the northern kingdom away. So only that Judah remained. So that's what Doc says. Anybody want to agree with him? No, I don't agree. All right, Wise Rat, what do you say? If you disagree, then you must have another opinion. I'm putting people on the spot. I'm enjoying this. I don't care that it says it's past 10 o'clock. You guys knew what you're getting into tonight with me. Timeline-wise, yes, we tend to believe that this is pre-Gideon. If I remember correctly, this is pre-Gideon. The Midianites, all right. Honestly, I'm going to help you guys out. It's not explicitly clear which captivity this is referring to. The language used here, and there's actually kind of this transition at about verse 29 or 30, where the way in which the passage reads in the original makes it seem like this was penned by two different guys. It's like there was somebody who came in after and added like an addendum to the story. This is kind of like, oh, this is the conclusion. Like it ends at verse 29. Then somebody came in after and it's like, this is how it turned out after that. And so with that in mind, it looks like verses 30 and 31 go together. So it says 31, they set up Micah's carved image that he made as long until, essentially, the house of God was at Shiloh, or until the house of God was no longer at Shiloh. Now, when did that happen? Like what is Shiloh? How long, like when was the house of God ever at Shiloh? It was pre-David's reign. Yep. We very do, Ongirth. The house of God was at Shiloh. That's where the tabernacle was kept up until a rather fateful battle where the Ark of the Covenant was taken into battle to assure victory against the Philistines. And the Israelites lost that battle, and the Ark of the Covenant was taken by the Philistines. And that's where we have the whole idea of Dagon constantly, the statue of Dagon falling over before the Ark of the Covenant, before the Philistines brought it back. It's suggested that the captivity of the land was the dominance of the Philistines because of the link between these two verses. During the time of Samson, which again would kind of fall in line because the captivity of the exiles, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, that wouldn't have happened if this was being written during like the reign of David. So that's just one alternative, but it's tough to be dogmatic here. That is during the time of Samuel, wise rat. But in all honesty, Eli and Samson and Samuel to a degree, along with Samson, were actually contemporaries. They were all alive at the same time. And I know that we like to read the Bible chronologically, but a lot of the book of Judges overlaps with other books. We obviously know that the book of Judges and Ruth overlap, but the last bit of the reign of the Judges corresponds with the first bit of 1 Samuel. We're getting into fun stuff this week. Also, thank you guys for going ahead and dropping the questions in there so we can address them as they're coming up. Now, I don't want to close out just yet because Ongirth brought something to my attention earlier that I don't think I came across, but it sounded interesting, so I want him to bring that up. I'm going to put him on the spot.
Wouldn't be the first time. Okay.
True.
So we've talked about how places have meaning in the Old Testament, right? And readers of the Old Testament are connecting. One of the speakers I heard today uses the term hyperlinking. They're hyperlinking stories together. I thought that was a good term. And we talked about that with Shechem before, right? We've it's one thing we've done well around here. It's you guys understand Shechem.
Yeah, we know Shechem.
So Dan has kind of a history like that. So it's kind of interesting. Dan comes back up again. It comes back up again in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. Okay.
Oh, I was right.
Yep. So looking at that map that we posted earlier, during the split of Israel and Judah, where would Dan fall?
Northern Kingdom. Northern Kingdom.
It's a not a trick question. Northern Kingdom. Yes. Okay, good. Awesome. Because it's up in the Golden Heights, right? We saw that in the pictures for that site that I posted. Very lush, beautiful place. And they mentioned that, right? That's why Dan went and took it. Okay. So they renamed the city Dan. Back in 2 Chronicles and 2 Kings, 2 Kings 10:29 or 2 Chronicles 13:8. We have an event here. The king, his name is Jeroboam.
Oh, yeah, I did read about this. Go ahead.
And he is erecting golden calves for worship. Okay? he is using the same logic that our good friend Micah used when creating the ephod. And his logic is this, okay? I want to consolidate power. I don't want my people to have to travel to Judean territory in order to worship God. Therefore, I'm going to erect idols here to consolidate power for myself and make God be more convenient for me. Okay, we talked about how that was Micah's whole stance, right? Okay, so here's what's weird: is Dan steals those idols from Micah, right? And we talked about play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Micah attempts to use the gods to consolidate power for himself. Dan comes through, takes them using the same rationale. Okay. What's interesting is that Micah's attempt to make religion convenient for him makes him vulnerable to attack. Dan does the same thing. Same thing happens to Dan with the Philistines. However, when the Northern Kingdom splits away and they're looking for a place to create a false center of worship, they choose this city because there's already a religious tradition and religious authority associated with it. So this sin that originates with this one guy whose mom makes idols for him after he steals gold for her carries with the entire lineage of Israel until northern Israel is finally sacked and carried away in captivity. But it's something that because we're talking about how this is a Judean scribe writing this, right? And we see his fingerprints in the timeline. We see his fingerprints in this story for sure, because this is something he's going to highlight as something that the Northern Kingdom did wrong, right? And it's one of those things that a ancient reader would pick up on as they're going through here, and then make connections to, okay, this is a whole bad situation. This is all because everybody was trying to instead of following God's commands and doing things God's way, using God's wisdom, trusting Him, right? They're trying to make things convenient for themselves. They're trying to do this on their own wisdom. So Micah, is trying to make make worshiping God more convenient for him, more powerful for him. Dan thinks that conquering their territory absolutely sucks because the people in their territory are pretty tough fighters. So they go and sack this area up here, not because the people are evil, but because the people are isolated and weak, right? And then they take on the way there, they're like, hey, wait a minute, we can make ourselves a huge spiritual center by stealing these idols from this other guy. And then it continues to carry on after northern Israel breaks away, and creates a stumbling block for their entire family generation after generation. It's really fascinating. There's a lot of connections to it.
What's that biblical teaching? The sins of the father shall be repaid up to the 7th generation. Something like that. Kind of see that reflected here, is that it isn't just one thing. It was just one man originally, but it spread and just became a scourge upon 10 of the tribes of Israel. Yeah, I had forgotten about that. Thank you for bringing that up. So a lot of the stuff this week is kind of geographical and kind of timeline centric, but at the same time, the lesson is just the same as last week, just vastly expanded. We see Micah making a mistake, Jonathan making a mistake. They're in their greed and their disdain for the commands of God. Their sin grew and grew and grew until it was an infection upon the entire nation. So what do we take out of this week? What do you guys think? There's at least a couple. Here's what I'll throw out. The illusion of isolation. The idea that this one thing that I'm doing is just only going to affect me, that it doesn't touch anybody else. That my sin or my disobedience has no effect on anybody else. This is a story that very clearly shows that our blatant disregard for the commands of God, his established order, brought about ruin for thousands, possibly millions of people. What else, guys? I know it's late. Yeah. I think one of the greatest things about God is that when he invades our life, things become very inconvenient. But that's the power of God, is that he is greater than the inconvenience. All right. Have a good night, Wise Rat. I know I've kept you guys late. Thanks for bearing with me. I thought I had a schedule okay, and then we got going in the last bit of the